Hi there, my name's Andy Young and I'm one of the automotive lecturers down at Unitec in Auckland, New Zealand, and this is one of my basic skills videos. And in this video I'm very quickly going to show you how to correctly fit a replacement battery to your car. Now you may say, hey look, I fitted loads of batteries to my car or to different cars, or hey, I could do that, I don't need telling about it. That's fine. If you don't need to know how to do it, that's cool, you don't need to watch the video, do you? So this video is for those of you that are maybe a little bit unsure or maybe a bit inquisitive about maybe some of the things that I'm going to cover that you maybe not aware about. Because fitting a car battery, you can do it lots of wrong ways. And there's a couple of things you really need to be aware of when you fit in the new car battery. And one is the security of the battery. The battery's got to be held in place. If it's wobbling around, then there's a risk that it could fall out of its perch and it could short out on the engine block or on the bonnet or whatever. Obviously, it goes without saying that you should be fitting a battery, the model of battery to your car that physically fits that car and has sufficient capacity to start the engine. That's all part of checking the battery code and making sure that the suppliers sold you the correct battery. More often than not, you'll get the right one. They'll give you the right one. But every now and again, for some unknown reason, completely the wrong battery ends up on a car or a four-wheel drive, and it's the wrong size, it's too tall, it hasn't got the capacity to start the engine when it's cold, all this kind of stuff. And that's a different issue, and you need to sort that out first. This video covers physically bolting the battery into place in the car, and even more importantly, connecting the terminals correctly. A lot of people just put them on and tighten them up, and that's not the way to do it. Let me show you the right way. Off we go. Oh, guys, a long way down. Okay, so we've got here, this is the Nissan Patrol's battery. It's a pretty big battery, and we run a big electric winch off this too. The first thing we should be doing is disconnecting the terminals. And we've got the negative and the positive. And the first one to disconnect is always the negative. Okay, so this particular negative clamp has got a 12mm spanner size nut on there, and we're going to free that off, give it a fair few turns, and then you should find that the terminal is loose on the battery. Now we need to lever that off. Quite often you get a little ridge on the lead terminal which makes it a bit hard to get that off there. You can do one of two things. You can get a big flat screwdriver in there and you can lever that apart slightly to splay it open. Or you can use your spanner just to lever it off like that. Okay, now that's got to remain away from that terminal. And the reason why we do the negative first is because if the spanner touches anywhere on the vehicle's body, it's not going to spark. These are negative earth vehicles normally, so that's the safe one to undo. Now we've taken the battery out of the circuit, it doesn't matter if the spanner hits the bodywork of the car whilst we're undoing the positive. Now, just as luck would have it, this one has got a 13mm nut on it. So we'll slacken that off. Now you might notice on this particular battery it's got some extra big heavy cables, and these are the ones that go down to the winch. Okay, so once you've undone that, again we've got a problem with a lip. Let's just get this out of the way. There we are. Okay. That's better. So we've got it moving around. It's just not going to come off that lip there. Look, so just very carefully put a screwdriver under there, and we should be able to lever it off. Now, while you're doing this, you really don't want to crack the top of your battery. That's not a good idea. And you don't really want to create too much movement on that. Maybe there, very tight. But tight's good. There we go. Look. Okay. So you can see that little ring we've just taken off of lead. Okay, so the next stage now is to remove the battery clamp. And you can see why we have to do the clamp last, because we need the battery to be held in place while we're taking these big terminal clamps off. Just hide that under there out of the way. Okay. Now the battery clamp shouldn't be that tight. Sometimes these bolts are a little bit rusty and you'll need to put some oil on them or some freeing oil, a bit of WD-40 or CRC spray. Just slacken those off. Now if you've got a radio in your car that has a code, then of course you're going to need to get one of those little code savers that you plug into your cigarette lighter socket. Otherwise you're going to have to recode your radio afterwards. Okay, here we go. So now the clamp can be slid away. We could even take that one out of the way if we want. These are just little hooks at the bottom, they just hook into place normally. That's how most battery clamps are. And yeah, that one's pinged up out of the way as well, so we can get rid of that. There we go. So the long one goes towards the engine side. And now we can take the battery out. That's the plan. There we go. Okay. And just be careful because these things are pretty damn heavy, especially the big ones. Just get rid of all that dust and stuff. There we go. Alright. So now you've got your new battery and you're going to pop it in. Now, you just need to bear in mind that you make sure that your terminals are in the same position they were before. Again, that'll all be down to whether you've got the right battery or not. But the positive terminal was over here and the negative was over here. So we'll stick the battery back in again. You can pretend it's a brand new one. It is actually only a few months old. There we go, one battery. Okay, now the clamp is just a reverse procedure of before. So we'll put the long one back in first, and that clips in down there. Look, there's a little hole on the side of the base unit. And same for this side, although it's a shorter clamp. Pop that on there. There we go. Nut back on. And you might want to have given these a bit of a wire brush, get rid of all the dirt and stuff out of them. Makes it a bit easier to put the nuts back on. If you're fitting an older battery, or say something else, make sure it's the right size. And if the terminals are a little bit corroded, this is assuming you've already charged it up so you know it's still working okay on the inside. Again, give the terminals a bit of a clean, because the contact between these clamps and the terminals is a common problem for poor starting and slow cranking and stuff like that. Okay. Now when you're doing up these clamps, don't over tighten them because you can actually crack the casing on the battery if you do. They're just there to stop the battery from flapping around and moving. Okay, so there we go, that's that bit done. Now, putting these back on again, we need to put the positive one on first. That's really important. So it's a reverse procedure of taking them off. And you could see before just how tight these were onto the terminals. I've actually deformed this terminal, a bit of a ridge even there where the gap was on the clamp. And that's really important. We need to have those terminals good and tight. So a positive one on first, and this is where it's imperative that you follow these special instructions, because otherwise you're going to have problems further down the line. Now make sure that the clamp bolts are pretty slack. These terminals, they're both different sizes and they are in fact tapered, which means the further down you go on the terminal, the larger the diameter. And we want these clamps to go all the way down to the bottom. We don't want them halfway up, because what can happen over time as this metal stretches when they've been taken on and off is the clamp will end up running out of adjustment. These two halves will be touching in the middle and it still won't be tight on the terminal. So always make sure that these are fully undone and they're tapped all the way down the terminal to get proper approach on there. So the positive one first, and the way to do that is just get yourself a socket, one that you know is going to clear the diameter of the terminal, so you're not going to get wedged on there. Stick it on top of the clamp and just gently just tap it down. You know, you don't want to be hitting it too hard. You don't want to risk. Yeah, you don't want to risk cracking the top of the battery. That will be catastrophically bad. But you do need to make sure that you're all the way down. I always get these spanners the wrong way around. Okay. And then once it's all the way down, then tighten up the clamp. And don't do it beforehand. You need to get all the way down that terminal. There we go. And again, don't over tighten them. They need to be tight, but don't go crazy, otherwise you might damage your clamp. Okay, so that's the positive one on. Now for the negative one. And we can use the same socket. That one's pretty loose as it is, so we can just give that a tap. Just keep an eye on the gap between the bottom of the terminal, bottom of the clamp. There we go, that's as far as we're going to get down there. And again, 12mm this time. We can just tighten that one up. Perfect. Okay, so job done. I'll just put another zip tie on there. I'll keep that on the top. Got to make sure that the positive's got no chance of shorting out on the bonnet. So it's a good idea. Just make sure that these, I mean, obviously these little terminal covers get damaged over the years. It's important that they're covering up the top of that terminal on the positive one. The negative one's not so important, but the positive needs to be covered really for safety's sake. And you can just use a zip tie to do that. Just thread it underneath. There we go. Excellent stuff. That's just going to help prevent that from shorting out on the bonnet. There should be an air gap, but just to be on the safe side, it's always a good idea to have that there. So there you go, a really short video on about covering how to change or replace the battery on your car. It's a really simple job. If you have, like I said earlier on, a coded radio, then you'll need to go out and buy one of those code savers, which you plug into the cigarette lighter socket inside the car. That just keeps the loom energized and prevents your radio from losing code. Other than that, just make sure that the battery is bolted in securely. If the clamp's damaged, go and buy a new one. And also make sure that the wire terminal clamps are correctly and fitted to the terminals of the battery. They need to be all the way down. Otherwise, what tends to happen is they get smaller and smaller, and every time you put them on, they ride up further and further up the terminals, and eventually the clamps are useless. And then when you hammer them back out, they just snap. You've got to put new ones on. So always make sure that the terminal clamps are right down at the bottom of the terminals before you tighten them up. And also make sure as well that the wires going into those terminal clamps, those two heavy wires that come in, make sure that they're not frayed or corroded or looking pretty manky, because that's going to cause high resistance and again give you other problems. And those issues are covered on my starting systems, on-car starting systems checks that we did on that little RAV4. So if you want to get a bit more in depth about that, dig out that video and have a look. Okay, hope you found that helpful. My name is Andy Young. I'm one of the automotive lecturers down at Unitech. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down the bottom and I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. If you found the video useful, then why not subscribe to the channel, wherever it is, down there, up there, wherever YouTube's put it, I always forget. But subscribe to the channel and then you'll get notifications whenever a new video pops up on the channel. And hey, you might learn something else. Who knows? Okay, cheers for now. Over and out.